Podcasters Roundtable round 100. Cue it up, Dave.
There we go. The graduation.
We're graduating. It's a little joke I've been making for a long time. A little music to go along with it. Hangouts doesn't like, so go ahead and fade that down because Hangouts doesn't like two things to be going on at once, including voice and music. But we made it, Podcasters Roundtable, round 100th. We got a long way to go. 100. That's it, reaching and celebrating 100 rounds. So super pumped up, a little too pumped up. I'm going faster than my mouth will allow, but cheers. And yeah, I feel like this is the beginning point. That graduation joke is all about, it feels like episode 100 for podcasters is sort of like the high school diploma. Like you get that, get ready, you know, like you've made it. And like, I don't know, we're going to talk about what it means and milestones and all that stuff. But let's meet the beautiful roundtable. Daniel J. Lewis, welcome back.
Wow, you say beautiful, and I'm the first person you think of.
No, it's
actually, I'm not sure if I appreciate that. I'll have to think about that. I'm from the Audacity to Podcast.com, and congratulations to my fellow co-hosts on 100 episodes too.
That's right. Dave and Daniel, you've been here since number one. I checked. We've been here for every single one, not every single one, but
I haven't been here for every single one. You've been here for all but one, because you weren't on the female roundtable.
Because I wasn't wearing a dress, so I was not allowed, which I was so close to doing, but it didn't happen. Dave Jackson, welcome back.
Yeah, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And I was really bummed because I was looking forward to Ray in a dress, but we couldn't quite pull that off. That would have been a good look.
Pulling it off would have been the problem. That's why they didn't let me on the roundtable with the dress. New roundtablers. First time, Ryan, welcome to the roundtable, a special roundtable.
Ray, it is great to be here. I'm from Med Ed Media. I help students get into medical school.
All right, he's a pro. Clearly, he's done 100 episodes because he got to the point and he got out, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Very nice. Steven, new roundtabler, welcome.
Thank you. From geekcastradio.com and a plethora of other podcasts on that network. So yeah, congratulations on 100.
Thanks. And I think that everybody on this round has at least one other show that has gone 100 episodes or more. So definitely the right people to be talking about how to celebrate what it means and what it takes to get to 100. So that's the key. We're not just celebrating. So if you're in the chat, you're celebrating with us. I see Gabe, he says, boom, 100. That's so cool. Podcastersroundtable.com/live if you ever want to participate in the chat. And yeah, so we are so excited, but we're going to also talk about what it took to get there and some of the challenges. So it'll be valuable, not just us or me sitting here having a beer or something. So I do have a clapper thing. It just says no. So I don't know what that's about. This is just something my daughter made. So in kindergarten, they're 5. So whatever. That was the only party popper I could get my hands on at the last second. But let's see. Let's start it right from the beginning. How many podcasts do you have, Ryan, that have made it to 100?
I have one that just hit 250.
There you go.
Yesterday, as we're recording this. And I have one that is 10 weeks away from hitting 100.
10 weeks. So that is probably one of the reasons. The fact that he said, I'm 10 weeks away, signals to me that he's hitting 100 because he's keeping a consistent schedule. Because I couldn't tell you in my other show it's hit 100. I'm not going to tell you how many weeks it's going to be from 200. I have no idea. It's just not that consistent. So that is one of the challenges to getting to 100 is being consistent, showing up often enough to reach 100. And that can be a super big challenge. Steven, how many shows have you reached 100 with?
Myself personally, I've hit about 3 that have gone over 100. On our network, we've had 6. My main podcast that I'm on, Altered Geek, it's gotten over 200 episodes. Just a couple episodes over that at this point. I've got a couple other ones that hit about 150 and about 140 something. So
awesome. Congrats. That is so cool. Scott Orr in the chat, he says, I have no idea why I'm so excited to be here for show 100, but I am. And as I was getting ready to hit record, I'm like, I feel way more excited than I should be. It's like one of those milestones, whatever. It's give you something to chase for. My baseball team's in dead last, and they were just trying not to go 0-for the other night at this other baseball park, and that was enough to get them all pumped up. So it's just one of those things, you sort of put it out there, and everyone gets excited. So we're definitely excited that Scott, that you showed up to celebrate with us. Daniel, how many do you have that have gone over 100?
All three of my main podcasts that I have remained the main host for the podcast, the Ramen Noodle Ones podcast and the Audacity podcast. They're actually all over 200, and the TV Show Fan podcast and the Audacity podcast are over 300.
Yeah, that's amazing. Dave, you have like 10 shows, so I don't even know who to ask you. Like, he's probably started one yesterday that's like 150 episodes already. So Dave's a powerhouse. He's been here forever. That's part of the thing. It's being here forever. Not only consistent, but being around a long time, 100 episodes. Okay, if we took it, typically, what is that, like 2 years of podcasting, right? Yep. If you showed up every week. Yeah. You guys, Ryan, are your shows weekly?
Weekly. I do 4 weekly shows.
Yeah. 4 weekly shows, is that what you said?
4 weekly, every week.
All right. Okay, so what was the hardest part let's just pick the first podcast you started and reached 100 with. What would you say was maybe the biggest challenge to getting 100 of those under your belt?
Starting.
Yeah, starting.
Actually releasing that first one. Really? I had 3 recorded for about probably 3 or 4 months before I actually released my first one.
Nice. I don't know where we heard advice recently. It's like record 3. Maybe it was Paul. Just throw them away. And then number 1's actually number 4. It's going to be a lot better, right? So what were you doing? Like, is the paralysis through analysis type thing?
No, it wasn't paralysis through analysis. It was fear. It was all fear. And
of fear of what?
Fear of putting myself out there, fear of imposter syndrome, fear of everything. And fear of being made fun of in the podcaster groups that I was using a Blue Yeti.
Yeah, that would be fair. That's not right. No.
Hey, you know what? Today I will
Steven holding up his Blue Yeti, just saying, if you know how to use it, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice.
Tip 1, don't pick it up and show it to the camera.
Don't swallow it either.
Yeah. Don't do that.
It's not a top end mic.
Daniel, what were you saying?
Oh, I would defend someone using the Blue Yeti. It's not as bad as it's gotten a reputation for.
Again, it's just knowing how to use it. That's the key.
That's the key.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. So how did you get over it? Ryan, how'd you get over that fear?
I bought a Heil.
You bought a Heil. Oh boy. We're gonna have to
No, I think it was just being challenged and saying, what are you waiting for? At the time I had a business coach, not a podcasting coach, but a business coach that was helping me build some things. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, just do it. I'm like, okay. And I did it. And that was 250 weeks ago.
Nice.
But did buying the Heil change things for you?
You know what? My personality is I always have to have the best and the brightest and the shiniest. I don't know if it was just the Heil, but once I had committed to doing it, then I was like, okay, let me do it and do it the best that I can.
It gave you confidence. I mean, the confidence you needed. So that doesn't have to
sound
be
sexy.
Yeah. Again, if you know how to use it. A Heil is not good out of the box. Well, it's debatable.
Yeah.
That's kind of similar to when I was in my early days of podcasting. Before I launched the Audacity podcast, I was still kind of a struggling podcaster, but learning to be consistent. And I upgraded to the Heil. And that, for me, putting in that investment made me want to take it a lot more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Gabe in the chat, Gabe Gonzalez says, Ray, Daniel, and Dave make podcasting seem so fun that it got him over the hump and started podcasting. So that's the goal of this show. Like, we're literally friends around a campfire shooting the hay, like just coming up and just talking about podcasting. So I'm glad that comes through. And I'm sure he's referring to our other shows, but that's killer. So yeah, I mean, you have to have fun with it. I tell it to people all the time, like, get out if you're not having fun, because you're probably not getting paid. So you've got a job you're not getting paid for while you're doing it, but you have to have fun. That'll keep you going to 100 episodes. Steven, what would you say is your biggest challenge in the first podcast you started?
The first one I started, I was trying to essentially replicate one I had started off with on a network I started off with. And it was kind of a amalgamation of just bad judgment, because I was not only kind of putting my own spin on it, but I also had issues with a co-host I started off with from the get-go, who I eventually had to switch to another co-host later on, who kind of fit with my personality better and with the show, and it kind of we kind of joke that with that first show, episode 8 was actually the first episode, just because it took us that long to get into the groove of actually having a decent show where it was listenable.
Right on. And so, I make a joke about the diploma and reaching 100, graduating, all that stuff. But what's a milestone for you guys? Was 100 a milestone? Did you celebrate it? We'll get into how, because I think you all celebrated. But Ryan, did you celebrate 100?
Yeah, I did.
All right.
I did, definitely.
And so what did it mean getting to 100 episodes? What did that mean to you?
What it meant to me was that I was there for my audience for 100 straight weeks. I think at that point, this podcasting gig was still a side project for me. And so really I was there providing value every week.
Right on. Yeah. It's funny because I was editing my 100 episode of the other show, the Podcaster Studio, and I included clips from all my shows, and I had to listen to the beginning. It was painful because I had to listen to them. But I commented to myself that I think it was around episode 75 where I finally felt like, you know what? I feel like that's Ray on the microphone. It took me 75 episodes or something like that to feel like myself on the mic and have that come through. It's not easy. So hitting 100 for me just felt like almost getting started, and that's kind of why I'm saying, I feel like I graduated and like I found out where I want to go next. I don't know if anyone else felt like that. Dave, how long did it take before you felt comfortable, or were you always that? Dave, you feel like an old radio guy, so maybe it's just natural.
I just know there are things that have come along that are now part of my opening that were never planned, that just came out of my head, that I was like, ooh, personal podcast coach. I like that. Let's write that one down. And, all the other stuff that it was never planned, but it just came out from doing it. And I think it's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you're going to be.
Do you sound like you from episode 1? Right.
No, episode 1, I cringe. My very first one, it starts off with some bad rap song and me going, all right, welcome to, it was
so bad.
Horrendous. I know. Yeah. So, but it's like anything else. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start if you're going to be great. And so, you got to start somewhere. And if you're not cringing at episode 1, you waited too long.
Yeah, that's actually a good tip. You're probably right.
I'm not sure who said that, but it's true.
Yeah, it is true. And Steve Lee in the chat from International Podcast Day, that's coming up this month. Right. Super excited. He just put pain equals gain. So yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit. And Ryan was a little afraid of that pain, but he hit publish, and look where he's at now. It's your business, right?
Yeah, it's the marketing arm of my business.
Right. Which is just insane. It's been so cool. We just went to Podcast Movement, and one of the coolest things for me was seeing so many people. I had skipped a year, and there were people who built businesses on top of podcasting. 2 years, the first year, we were there, we're seeing this. They're still there. They're back, and they keep growing, right? So podcasting, for at least this bubble, has been a good thing to be involved in, but it takes 100 episodes. It takes 300 episodes, whatever, before, you can kind of maybe see some benefits. I won't say that. That doesn't sound right completely. You could see benefits in 5 episodes, but you've built something by being here over the long haul. Steven, 100 episodes. I mean, getting that marker the first time for you, did that mean anything to you? Did that, you certainly celebrated it, so I'm thinking it meant something.
Yeah. The first podcast we hit, I think, was our movie podcast. And so we kind of covered like all inclusive of a lot of episodes we'd covered in the past. And we kind of make a point out of doing like this whole this is your life kind of thing with our podcast when we hit the episode 100 mark, because it kind of as you had mentioned, is kind of like that graduation moment. You kind of get to see and reflect back on some of the great moments of the past, and then some of the not so great moments, and some of the things that you've changed along the way.
That's right. I mean, if you don't suck and make a bunch of like mistakes, you can't have your classic 100 blooper reel. Like you want the bad parts. Like those are the best parts. You want to share those. Daniel, the first time you hit 100, where were you in your, I would say, journey, career, in terms of podcasting? What did it mean to you?
it was definitely a milestone and something I wanted to celebrate with my audience because um, it it was such a significant number going from double digits to now triple digits, and recognizing that I'd invested so much up until that point, and that I'd heard this stuff from, I think, Todd Cochran before at PodCamp Ohio, maybe the first one, where Dave thinks he met me, but I still don't remember ever meeting Dave then. But anyway, Todd had said something like, if you make it to episode number such and such, then you'll most likely make it to episode number such and such. If you make it to that, then you make it to that, then you make it to that. And he said something about, if you make it to episode 100, it's likely that you'll keep going indefinitely. And I remember that in my mind, and I felt like, yes, this means I've got good momentum. This means I will keep doing this for however long.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's, yeah, we've heard those numbers, like 7, make it to 7, or 7 episode is the infamous number before you, like, most people pod fade. And then like half of those people make it to like 13, and then half of those make it to 20, and then the 100, which I haven't heard. The 100 means that you kind of probably heard from Todd before, but you're going to probably be here for the long haul. So yeah, I mean, because you've really, we're talking about 2 years of podcasting if you're doing it weekly, which I would say is the fastest. Outside of someone having a daily show, you'll find the grind, how much of a grind that is, real fast. That next week comes up like a freight train, man. It barrels down on top of you. So you have to be doing it for 2 years. So not surprised that you'd be around after, if you're going to be here for 100. Ryan, how did you mark that occasion? Do you remember? You've had enough episodes now. Like,
I had to go back and look.
See? Nice.
Like, what did I do? So in my mind, 100 episodes, if I could celebrate it myself, but I wanted to get the audience in. As I told you earlier, it was about being there for the audience. So I reached out to my audience and I said, call in your story, your journey, maybe how the podcast has helped you on that journey. And I played the whole podcast was 6 or 7 different students calling in their journey on what they were doing and how the podcast played a role in that. And that was really the whole podcast.
Yeah. It's funny because other shows that I listen to have gotten to 100, and I will say it doesn't have to be 100, but I kind of hate the show that sort of plays, they just play clips of their past. Like, I've heard all those. Like, if I'm a listener listening to 100, I probably am entrenched in your show and I've heard all those. And it can be fun, but it's difficult. It's difficult. Everyone wants to celebrate their 100, whether, it's a number, but it, like Daniel said, you're going from 2 digits to 3. It's the first time you don't have a 0 in front of your number, if that's how you're doing it, whatever. But you're trying to think, how do I celebrate 100? And even with this round here, I was thinking, well, what do we do? And you think, I got to blow it out. Now, the funny thing is, the best way to celebrate 100 is to have a podcast. Well, you all do that. You have to, right? You have to have a podcast to celebrate 100. So we're celebrating by having a show, but we're doing it with the fans here and the fans, the Roundtablers. I think everyone in the chat has been on the Roundtable. It's the beauty of this show. So podcastersroundtable.com/guest. If you want to get on a round, that's how you do it. And so I just thought we'd grab some people who definitely have crossed 100. I think I started asking people, how did you celebrate 100? That was sort of the litmus test. And then they told me, if they tell me they did, then it's like, hey, we'll bring you on a round. So Steven, how did you celebrate that first 100?
We kind of just got a couple of us together, kind of sat down and conversed about a lot of the jokes that were kind of inside throughout the show. In the process, but we tried to keep it fresh, and then my friend, of course, was like, well, we have to include some of these clips because he has a hard drive full of outtakes.
Yeah, that's good
that he loves to pull out on us. So it was fun reminiscing on it, and we just kind of made this whole spectacle of the the show, and tried to get as many email responses and voicemails of what the show meant to them, of the listeners, and just tried to kind of include them in our journey as well, because they were the only reason that it got as far as it did, was the feeding off of each other.
Yeah, it's a common theme here. Obviously, you can hear we're celebrating with the people in the chat. We got new roundtablers. We have the co-hosts, all of us. And then you can hear everyone celebrated kind of with their audience. They brought them in. So, you could have a podcast and not really have interaction with your listeners, right? You can make 100 episodes without ever, you're talking, you don't even have to talk to your listeners. You could just be on the mic talking to yourself about whatever you want. But, where do you think that relationship is around 100 for the typical? I would say for this show, people tweet at us, they submit to be on the show, they join us on the roundtable, and then we feel like we know them. So the audience is definitely wrapped into this show. But Dave, when you were, at 100 and your first podcast, what kind of relationship did you have with your audience at that point? You've got pictures of your audience on the wall, literally behind him. So you guys should check that out on the video. YouTube.com/podcasters roundtable. Always plug in here. But Dave, what was your relationship at 100? Were you connected to your audience, or were you still trying to get people to do the infamous, like, hey, please call in and write an email?
No, that's where things started to really kick in, where you had, well, number one, you had, like we have, we're all friends here. So you have your friends who listen. So that's kind of fun because you know some of your listeners by name, and then some that you've never met, you've never seen. So you're able to, you should be at least be able to name some of your listeners by name, because when they send an email, that's gold. Think about what it takes. Somebody has to, get on their phone or get off the couch or whatever to send you an email. So if you can reach out to that person, that's really going to solidify that relationship and get that conversation going behind the scenes so that there's something to talk about when you get back on the microphone. So yeah, to me, that's when things really start. I think at that point you should have a few, if nothing else, 5 to 10 that you should be able to go, yeah, these are my my peeps. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the fun thing. Cause I know, Ray, you said you did a clip show. I did a clip show for the first 3 years. And when I did 300, it's like Ryan was saying, the whole show was nothing but old clips. And it was like, it got to the point of like, does this have any value? Because we spent the entire episode looking backwards. And I was like, if people were with me there, that was kind of like, so that's the fun part. The longer you go, like I just realized I'm 18 away from 600. I have no idea what I'm going to do for 600. Are
you still celebrating those triple digit mark? Like, I mean, at this point, it should just be 600. You should.
Yeah.
500, I hope, was big. 1,000.
500 was fun. Yeah. 400 was fun. But that's the problem. After a while, you go, I guess I could rent a blimp.
Rent a blimp. Because you're making all that blimp cash from your podcast, right? So, yeah, it makes total sense.
So,
go ahead.
I don't know. That's the problem is after a while, if you do, because you should celebrate these are, because not everybody gets here. There's the Todd. What's Todd up to? Like 1,000 something with Geek News.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are people that get there and some of those don't. And that's why you should kind of celebrate them. I'm just not sure how. I'm always worried about what value is it to listen to me pat myself on the back for an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here is present some value here. Like thinking about as everyone's approaching, let's see, I've guessed 688 or whatever that number is. It's hard to see from here, but he says he crossed number 5. So he has 95 more episodes to go. Right. And so everyone is at some stage, and a lot of people listening to this or watching are going to reach 100 and they'll think, what could they do? And maybe we'll give some ideas. I mentioned the Podcaster Studio and it was 100. So I tried to pull out, it wasn't just a clips. I actually pulled out the bad clips. I was like, look how bad this sounds. And so you could hear the progression. It was just the intros and stuff like that. But I tried to give 100 tips from the entire catalog. In fact, if you just listen to Podcasters Roundtable 100, you'll be caught up on the whole thing. You almost don't have to listen to the rest. It's the stuff that's still relevant, and I didn't include FeedBurner, stuff like that, right? It's start there. But I'm curious, going back to this, how did you celebrate? Well, Daniel, did you say how you celebrated?
No, for the Ramen Noodle, which was my first podcast and also the first one to hit episode 100 in early 2012, I did a live call-in show with our audience for the Clean Comedy podcast. And
now, you have to actually be, I talked about being in communication with your audience. You can't do a live show with people calling if you're not connected, right? That's the tough part.
Yeah, we had been doing a live show for a regular schedule up until that point, and we were telling everyone our 100th episode is coming up. Save your funny stories, call them in live and be on the podcast with us. So that was a lot of fun to be connected with the community in that way.
Well, there's a good tip there too, because I think people listening to this, like it's a long, like podcast or the long game. You were engaging really early on, letting people know this was coming and what you wanted to do, right? So if you were building up to it, so that actually you had that when you got there.
Yeah, for maybe 7 episodes leading up to it or so. And then for the Audacity podcast, that I think I had an even bigger lead in going into episode 100, because what I wanted episode 100 to be was 100 podcasting tips from podcasters. And I wanted it to be from 100 different podcasters. But some people, Dave Jackson, who have multiple podcasts would call in and say, "Hi, this is Dave Jackson from
He's a cross
podcast
promo.
A." And then here's my tip. And then podcast B. And here's my tip.
Nice hack, Dave. Nice hack. That's a Daniel style gray hat hack for you.
It was a lot of fun. And boy, it was hard putting all of those things together. Yeah. But it was really cool then to focus on the community. Like Ryan was saying, I don't like it when these milestone episodes, but milestones by numbers, the kind of things that your audience will recognize the milestone too. I don't like it when that is introspective or navel gazing, as some people will say. I like it when that kind of thing involves your community, celebrates with them, or provides extra value in some way. You can use like the birthday things or anniversaries for the other stuff.
Yeah. Mix minus go bad there or something. I don't know. Got weird. Got started feeding back for a second there. Now I'm hearing myself. Strange.
What I started doing was, I think
Dave.
Yes.
I think your connection is that my connection or Dave's connection. Daniel.
I think it's everybody.
It's Dave. You must have a mix minus going, and something's going haywire with it. I'm gonna bring you back in. Let me see if I'm gonna mute Dave. Live production, people.
This is what we do for our 100th episode. We bring in tech problems.
We diagnose podcast tech problems in real time.
Is it fixed?
No.
Okay.
Dave's going to mute himself. All right. So I'm curious, anyone, this is off the cuff, so you might not have this prepared, but does anyone recall someone else celebrating an episode 100 you thought was really cool? Or I guess really any milestone? Can you think of other some podcasters have celebrated 100 episodes, or like I said, a milestone that sticks out to you, that maybe a show that you listen to?
I remember, I think it was Dave's 400th episode. He did some little parody of a bunch of different podcasts.
Nice.
And I loved it. It was hilarious. And then he also even included me too. It was like some little gadget that he said he was playing with, and it was like engaging entrepreneur mode, and it's like are you ready to explode, and then there was like
he said
Daniel
Binky,
mode.
Binky
I've got
and the
13
Wiz
tips for you. Yeah
Binky and the Wiz, which I mean, there was something I was almost like in tears, and it must have been that as well. The Binky and the Wiz was just classic. So
is it fixed yet?
Yeah, I think maybe it is.
Yeah,
I switched microphones and switched back. So
yeah, well, turn it on and turn it off. We did that even before Ryan had to flip off the switch and flip it back on to get things working again. We called support for that, by the way. Google, how do we fix this? Restart your browser. Mm-hmm. How about you guys, Ryan? Or
it's funny. I always when we have these discussions, right? We're all podcasters, and in the podcasting groups, we're all podcasters, and so a lot of this discussion is podcasters looking at podcasting. And I wonder, from a casual podcast listener, if they even know, do they even care? Like they show up and they're there to listen for your information, for entertainment, for whatever you're providing. And oh, it was 100. Okay, whatever. I'm here. I just want to listen. So it's funny. We're having this discussion about how to celebrate, and I think for the average listener, they just don't care. And so it's funny when you ask that, Ray, about what I've listened to and heard from other podcasts. I haven't paid attention.
Yeah,
I just listen. I show up and listen.
And that's one of the things I was saying about, some people almost feel like they cheat, even though it takes a lot of work to put together like a clips show of just clips and record. That is like one of the worst episodes you'll produce. I think San Francisco, he says he had 100, or for 100 they did a panel of 10 talking about games when they usually only cover one. He said it was a lot of fun, but he doesn't think he'll do it again, probably because it was just so different and a lot of work. And so, I'll get to a milestone like that. Now here, it's almost kind of like a repeat. And I'm like, not interested in this. But there's a certain segment, I think, of the audience that is really kind of along for the ride with you. And they're there to celebrate. I mean, they're in the chat right now, right? Steven and Francisco and I see Ryan's even in the chat and in the roundtable. Nice work there, bud. And so, yeah, it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up of what do you want to do and how do you best serve the audience. You've got a new episode. They're expecting content with sort of celebrating. So I don't know. Let's tackle that. Like, should you even celebrate a podcast 100? I mean, Ryan?
Should you? I think you should. Even though I said it's for podcasters, I think you should, because podcasting is hard. To be here every week now for 250 weeks for my main show, it's a lot of work and a lot of long nights sometimes. And I think you do need to pat yourself on the back. And I don't think you need to turn the podcast into a pat on the back, but I think you still need to mark it as something special. And so one thing that I've done every 50 episodes, actually, for my audience, students that want to go into medical school, I read the Hippocratic Oath every 50 episodes just to mark it. And then for my 250th, I had listeners call in and they read it. And then I put together all of the different clips into one oath.
Oh, that's
cool.
So
I got them involved. It wasn't a huge 100 milestone, but it was 250, and it was something that I do normally. And so I got them involved. So I think you do need to celebrate.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be as simple as saying, we made it to 100. Thank you so much. Like, and move on with the content. I mean, you don't have to go out and get fancy homemade clappers like I have, graduation music, and we blew it out here on the roundtable. Just saying, it's Class A service. But Steven, do you think you've had so many shows on the network or that you've been a part of across milestones? Do you think we should mark these, and is it something that's important, or at some point, we can talk about, when you get past 100, then Dave's on 600, should he even bother anymore?
I think it's kind of important to still bring notice to the fact that you've made it that far, and that you've kind of continued not only for yourself but for your companions that listen to the show. But what I've done, at least with my current show, Altered Geek, that one I would spend about 20-25 minutes at the beginning of the episode kind of doing a little bit of the fun moments over the last 100 episodes with a co-host, and then I would go into just regular content so that it was still something to kind of commemorate it, but it was also providing that value that they come for every week.
For sure. Here's a pro tip. Time it out to 30 seconds. So when you press the button once, you're past it.
Yeah.
It's 30-second skip. Handy. I'm kidding. But Daniel, Dave, what do you guys think about this? Ryan wants to be controversial. Let's get controversial. That's what we do here. We have fun. Ryan's stirring the pot. No.
I like what you did. You played all your clips, but it was in an educational way to kind of go, is this still relevant? So it was a clip show, but it was still educational. It was a nice little summary, I thought. So I think that's where I've always tried to look back and go, even if it's some weird sketch, the sketch has some sort of like, here's one to grow on, folks, kind of edge to it. Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, for the number milestones, I think giving extra value, making it something that your community will want to celebrate with you, will want to be part of if they can, or will appreciate in some way. Like you look at also Doctor Who had a few years ago their 50th anniversary episode, which was a very special episode. It premiered in theaters. A friend of mine is a big Doctor Who fan, and he was making a big deal about it. And when my wife and I have been catching up on Doctor Who, when we watched that episode, we appreciated it too. I mean, we watched only the new season, but we recognized previous doctors. We recognized from the original series, that is, even, and recognizing that this story was significant to the whole thing. So it was extra value for us. The same thing with other TV shows. 100 is a big number in TV shows, because when a show reaches 100 episodes, they get major syndication
Yeah.
as an option.
Ryan and I are both flashing or putting our fingers together like it's money time. Hey, sweet. I cannot wait to go to the mailbox and pick up my podcast 100 mail check.
You can enter syndication on Spotify now. I mean, no, never mind.
That was pass round. Nice job, Spotify. Yeah, so, I mean, it's cool. I mean, we got, let's see, Michael Delaney in the chat. He says, absolutely, you should celebrate major milestones like 100. What other milestones are there? Who else? Anything else that you guys can think of that you're like, yes?
Well, I would think you're like Daniel mentioned your birthday. So for me, that's April 4th when I started podcasting.
Oh, you're saying your podcast birthday.
Your podcast birthday.
Which we missed. Daniel reminded me. We just missed. I missed noting it. So we didn't celebrate it was like 5 years. It was 5 years, right? This show's 5 years old, Daniel?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, you won't know by our number, right? We just told you 2 years to 100. This is a bi-weekly show, so it's more like 4, and then there's some skip. So, yeah, you're along with Ray Ortega. That's what's going to happen. But your birthday. So, Dave, you're saying your podcast birthday is important to you?
I think so, just because it's, again, one of those things that not everybody gets to. So when you make it to year 2, and a lot of people quit after month 4, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm still here. And it's a way to just, to me, I see that as a way to, if a new listener's coming along and they hear, wow, this guy's been doing it for 2 years, it's kind of like, okay, I think I can plant my flag here because this person isn't going away. Where if it's some brand new person, maybe they're not sure they're going to do this or not. I'm not sure. And that's, again, where it's weird. I'm thinking through the head of a podcaster. I don't know if Joe listener even digs that deep into stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I do, it's kind of like ratings and reviews. Like it's that social proof. I think that's a good point. I haven't thought of before. Like you show up and someone's been there for a long time. It does signal to you that A, there's a lot of content to learn from, whether they stop tomorrow or not. And B, they really are into this. Like, I like that. I think that's a nice indicator, whether it's subconscious or not. But yeah, I mean, go ahead, Dan.
It's a good excuse to get introspective or to talk about the podcast in the podcast. Just like what did everyone talk about on Blab? God rest its soul. They talked about Blab at some point while they were on Blab. But in the podcast, like for my, it ended up being episode 301 for me because of schedule, but it was my 10-year anniversary in podcasting. And I decided to take that opportunity to tell the full mostly unfiltered story of how I got into podcasting and how really podcasting helped save my life in many ways. And it was a story that I knew could inspire my audience. So it wasn't all just, hey, this is why I chose to do the podcast. This is why I'm so amazing. This is me, my, now. But it was something still trying to give value that the audience could enjoy too.
And Daniel threw out a cool word there. It's an opportunity. If you want to, you can say, hey, it's my 2nd birthday in podcasting. And then it gives you a chance to do something, email me and I'll give you a free sticker or whatever it is, something to do something for your audience. So
Dave says that because he just showed us before we record. He has stickers. So if you want a sticker of School of Podcasting, I don't know who he's giving those out to. I will tell you that there are Roundtable stickers, and I was at Podcast Movement. I don't think I handed out a single one. So they're super exclusive. Looks like everyone's holding up their sticker. I think Sean is.
Hey, now, actually, I got to give a shout out to Gonna Geek Network. Our friend Stargate Pioneer, SP over there. He gave me what I think is super cool and practical swag for a podcast. It is a leather drink coaster.
Nice.
Yeah. And what's nice about it being leather?
I mean, it's cut into it, too.
Silent.
Yeah.
You put your drink on this, and it doesn't make a sound.
Well, he's a geek, so I'd expect that.
Is that barcode scannable?
No, I don't think so.
Is it a barcode?
It looks kind of like a barcode.
Oh, yeah. You got to bust open.
I can't remember if it's scannable.
Well,
it's probably screaming us right now.
It should take you to the podcast. I mean, would it even read it?
That would be awesome.
It would be awesome. Cool. That's cool. Yeah.
It's a coaster and a QR code at the same time.
Exactly. In the, well, I want to say thank you to Google for not killing a product that I built on top of, right? Congrats, Google. It's still alive. They killed Google Plus, which actually hurt the show a lot. And there's something to say about building on different platforms, because I used to be able to send out an RSVP, basically an event page, and you would RSVP, and people would click it and it would remind them that we're going to have a live show. And guess what? When we did live, they got the reminder and everyone would show up and we get like 50, 60. We've never recovered from that. I still send out email lists, podcastersroundtable.com/guest. That's how you get onto that. Still not the same, but you know what? Still, thank you, Google, because this is a great platform for what we do here. I've enjoyed this a lot. It makes it super easy to bring people in. And if you've seen the recording process, you know how I do that differently for the audio only. But again, thanks a lot. But in the chat, Michael Delaney, he says, I'm only at episode 25 and I'm concerned that my content is drying up. Another challenge, right? Super easy to get to episode 7, 15 off the top of your head almost, because I mean, with a show like Daniel, Dave, and myself have about podcasting, we have something we can just talk about one topic. And eventually you have to plan these things, right? So I don't know, Ryan, did you ever get to a point where you're like, holy cow, episode 30, what am I going to talk about next? Or are you not run out yet?
No, I run into that problem a lot. And the majority of my shows are interview based, where I'm telling the story or extracting the story out of a guest of their journey to medical school. But I do many solo shows, and I'll do my wife as a physician. She'll jump on and we'll do stuff together. So there are nights where it's like, oh no, I don't have an episode for tomorrow. Hey honey, can you come record a podcast with me? Because it's easier to record with her. We can just banter about something that's in the news or bring up a topic. But yeah, it's coming up with consistent, good content is hard.
Yeah, that's one of the keys, right, Dave? I don't think have you talked about not just putting up an episode just because it's that week, right?
I would rather have a late episode that's good than a not so great episode that's on time.
Because everybody's obsessed with not missing a week. Right. I'm not, clearly, but and I get that. I get the point of that. But it can get to a point where you're so obsessed with not missing a week, and there are reasons for that, but that you just put out something that's just really not, you're kind of almost wasting the time. As people are so scared of disappointing their audience by missing a week, you can also waste their time by putting out something just because it's that week, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And I'll challenge that a little bit.
Yes.
Because I think, again, coming from the podcaster point of view, our assumption is that every listener has heard every episode and knows everything that we're going to say. And so it has to be the best content all the time. Whereas the truth is that the majority of people listening probably are maybe new or maybe listen every once in a while. And because you are the quote unquote expert, they're listening to you. Whatever you say, they're going to, for the most part, enjoy it and get something from it.
Are you saying we can rehash content if we don't have content?
I would never rehash. I'm not a rehasher.
Really?
No,
I mean, you can update content.
I would put out a new episode if you want to update.
That's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean like repurpose. Like I'm saying you talked about, because you're saying that people check in, check out. You talked about a topic in episode 2. You're going to bring it back up in episode 32 to talk about it again, right? Because you're saying
that I would do. I wouldn't re-release. Like I wouldn't take
I don't
episode 18 and put it back up.
No,
I've done that, especially if there's something new, or if I have a new angle on it. But to me, and I have a great example. In fact, I have it here with me. This I'm holding up to the camera. This is John's Soul's Foods. It's his grilled chicken. Now, why is this important? Because for years I've eaten grilled chicken from Tyson out of a bag. I throw it in my salads. And for whatever reason, there's some sort of supply issue, and they weren't at my grocery store for like 2 weeks. So I had to buy a different brand. And guess what? This brand is better. I'm not going back to Tyson. I think that's why people worry about missing an episode, because that gives your audience, well, what am I going to listen to on the way to work? I don't know. Search. And then they find something else, and then they never come back. You lose them.
It's like I think in baseball it's Wally pipped or something like that. There's a term where basically there's a famous story of basically it's if you get hurt, your backup comes in and you never get back in the game. Right? Tom
Brady, man. Tom Brady took over some guy that hurt his knee, and that poor guy won't go down at all. So
I won't make any Tanya Harding jokes. It's a way to get back in the game.
So I think that's why that is. But and I've always struggled with that myself, because I'm like, wait a minute, if your content is really that good, shouldn't you be able to skip a week and have people come back and go, okay, he skipped a week. I think it's always good if you're going to skip a week to announce it. But if you don't, and you skip a week and people go, what? There's nothing here this Monday. Well, that's it. I'm unsubscribing right now. I don't think that's going to happen, but
that's always been a weird thing to me. I really love this person, but you know what? They skipped a week of their free content. I'm out of here. Sorry.
I'm not going to not pay you anymore.
It's funny because after a while you build an email list and you send out an email and you see a bunch of unsubscribes. Someone just broke something. I don't know what that was, but you see a bunch of unsubscribes and it hurts a little bit. But at some point you're paying for that. So you're like, okay, well, if you don't want to be here, good, please unsubscribe, as opposed to just having a dead email out there. So yeah, I mean, if they don't, people are going to come and go. We talk about competition in the space. Dave, Daniel, and I do a similar podcast, and some are going to discover Dave through this podcast, and they're going to go over and they're going to unsubscribe from me and go listen to Dave because you only have so much time. That's fine, right? I mean, you're just here to basically provide value, and people will come and go as they want. So I don't think it's a problem.
A milestone that I think is a little bit too much ego stroking is celebrating some kind of download milestone.
Yeah.
Like to say, hey, we have 10 million downloads or 1 million or 100,000. I mean, it's cool to say maybe, hey, thanks for supporting us. We've reached 10,000 or whatever the number is. That can be cool to thank your audience for that.
They can be something in tweet, right? I mean, we hit 10 million at work, and it was I didn't actually tweet it out, but I was going to. That's it.
But to make a major celebration of that, I think is a little bit selfish.
Well, okay, so why? Why does that? Why are you saying that?
Well, then for one thing, that number could be completely meaningless.
If you're on
SoundCloud. I host on SoundCloud.
It was both coming with the same joke.
Yeah, or if you have the twice a day podcast that each episode is 90 seconds long and it's twice a day, then reaching a big milestone is in download numbers is not that hard. So the number could be meaningless, but it's also a little bit bragging, kind of like saying, hey, everybody, I finally made $1 million this year. I don't know. It's weird.
That reminds me. It's a good one. Like, does anyone feel like they've cheated their way to 100 episodes? So I will say, if the Podcaster Studio, early on, there's like maybe two episodes that are 5-minute video interviews. That's not really an episode. So like 100, technically it's 100, but it's not really. So, that just made me think of things that might be in the feed, like quick videos or something that really don't count.
When I first started the Audacity to podcast, I don't know if my doing this caused it, but it was a big deal to me back in 2009 to 2010. That's what it was. 2010, when the Audacity podcast made it to the front page of iTunes in the new and noteworthy section. Sorry, Dave. And I think I might have partially caused that because I did wonder what would happen if I just click the subscribe button a whole bunch of times on my podcast. And I don't know if I actually caused it or not, but I was maybe cheating a little bit.
It worked in the early days. I know that Rob Walsh and a couple other guys had developed a script.
Very early days. Yeah, definitely.
Very early.
By 2010, I don't know.
Big shout out to Emily in the chat, because she's like, she just opened up a bottle of wine. Cheers to celebrate with you guys. I appreciate that. She's saying she came in around episode 50, round 50. And this was the first podcast about podcasting she found. Good job with the SEO. Thank you. Don't do anything. But that was cool. And Emily, I think she's here like every time we're here. And she's been on the Roundtable. She's like a power viewer. I get to say viewer because we do this live in video. So that's very cool. So thanks, Emily, and have a glass for me for sure.
Cheers.
So, Steven, were your first 100 episodes, were they all like full length, full episodes, or do you have a cheat episode in there? And I won't say on purpose, but there are things that are, in fact, you know what I'll say, that when I started off, I was surprised when I went back through my catalog to find that early episodes were 12 minutes, 17 minutes. In my mind, they were all 1 hour long. I couldn't believe it. So has that changed, Steven, for you guys? Did you guys start off at like short format, or has it all been long format?
Predominantly, most of our content on Geekcast Radio has been it's all been long form for the most part. We've had a couple shows where certain episodes the information kind of just dries up early, like under the 20 to 30 mark. But we generally shoot for a 45-minute show, kind of planned out, and then sometimes it goes over, sometimes not. We've had shows go, depending on the content type, as long as 3 to 4 hours before. And again, it was for a specific type of show, but predominantly the week-to-week stuff is about an hour and a half long. And I try to keep around that number.
Yeah. It actually reminds me in some of those episodes where there were 5-minute videos, I more than made up with for that for like 2.5 hour deep dives into something else. So it's a balancing act there. I mean, do you guys all, Ryan, do you try to keep things at a specific episode length, and do you try to hold true to that, or do you not care?
I try to tell the story as best as possible, and it takes as long as it needs to take. I was actually just scrolling through my list, and I see one that's 15 minutes long. I think that's my smallest.
It's a cheat.
I don't think it's a cheat, because the content was still there. I didn't have more to say about it, and so I stopped.
Yeah, and that's it. That's these videos we went to live, and there was a bunch of tips, and that's one of those things. I mean, Dave, don't you talk about, not making any longer than it needs to be or something like that?
Yeah, it's how long does it need to be? It needs to be as long as it needs to be, and not a minute more. Or if we use the Valerie Geller line, there is no such thing as too long, only too boring. And so for me, I always I don't want my show to be less than 30 minutes, unless of course that's all the material I have, and I try not to go over an hour. So I was just looking at my stuff, and most of them clock in around 40 minutes.
Why do you want it to be less than 30?
I don't know. I guess just because, in the early days, there were like 20 minutes. And I remember I went to Blog World in New York. It was like, it might have been a New Media Expo at that point, whatever it was. And one of the things, if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I love your show, I'm a listener," I would ask them, like, what do you like about it and what do you dislike about it? And the thing I heard over and over and over was, it's too short.
That was probably me. So Daniel and Dave, not sure when they met each other in person for the first time, but I know vividly, because I went to lunch with Dave and I walked up to him and I'm like, "Damn, you're really tall." Like, and I'm not, but you're much taller than I thought. Because that's a fun thing about podcasting. You meet people in person and you're like, you don't look like anything that I thought. But I remember Dave, I know the School of Podcasting because of big, long episodes. And for me, I've told the story how I used to get in trouble at work because I was listening to Dave like this, one earbud in, and I try to sneak it in, and they'd say, "Hey, take that out or you're going to be written up." And I'd say, "Go ahead and write me up because I'm learning and I'm trying to get out of this place." And it would suck. And see, he switched after a while because he'd do like a mic review, and then he'd line up 5 mics and he'd just go through them, and it was just long, and he'd have listener feedback, and it was fantastic for someone who's at work. And then he'd do like some point you switched to shorter episodes. I was like, I don't like this. I want you to go on and on. I don't know. So Daniel, what do you think about episode length, and do you try to adhere to that? And Dave has an artificial minimum in his head. So do you have that as well?
I say that the perfect length of an episode is the same as the perfect length of string, as long as it needs to be. Now, for my episodes, I don't plan them to be a certain length. They kind of end up being around a certain length. But I kind of feel a little accomplished when I present what I think is good content and it's a short episode. The reason why I appreciate that is because I feel like I didn't waste any time at all. And I'm still confident the content I gave was good. And I like that because I can tend to be long-winded sometimes, especially when I go deep into the weeds on some idea. So whether it be a public presentation or a podcast episode, if I go short, I feel like I actually accomplished something better and provided more value in less time.
Emily says she's working on episode length now, asking her listeners if they want longer episodes, but only once per week instead of twice. And so far, longer is winning. We see in podcasting, longer does good. You check the charts at any time on iTunes, and you see some of the biggest ones are really epically long podcasts. So, that's good. But again, it depends on the content that you have. I'm curious about going back to helping out. I think it was Michael. It was a good question. and we talked a little bit about how do you keep going? How do you find that content? Now, Steven, on the movie podcast, you're probably partly your subject for the podcast is helping drive that because you pick a movie and review it, right? I mean, that's pretty easy in terms of not running out of content. There's enough movies.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just kind of what movie do we feel like doing this week? And then we just kind of, that's the movie we do.
Is it a specific niche of movies?
It kind of jumps over around. I mean, we kind of stick with a lot of the stuff that kind of pop culture kind of propels, and but it's also our personal movie inventory that we really love to go back and watch. So like we just got done doing the Star Trek films. We did all the original series films, and then we did the Next Generation films, and then the Kelvin J.J. Abrams films. And in preparation for the new show, what's coming out in the middle of the month. So, I mean, it's sometimes we try and gauge it based on other mediums of stuff that's coming out. And then other times it's kind of a just, you know, what do you feel like talking about this week? You know, what's a movie we haven't seen in a while?
Yeah.
You know, on this topic of running out of ideas, I still have a list from when I first started the Audacity to Podcast. When I sat down and made a list of 35 topics that my episodes would be about. There are still things on that list I haven't covered yet. But there are some things that I'll brainstorm a dozen episode ideas. I'll put them on a list. And when it comes time to record or when I'm planning out my schedule for what episodes I want to do, I'll look at the list and I'll think, oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing that episode. But man, I need to do a lot more research on that one. That's going to take a lot of work to prepare that episode. I want to push that one back a little bit farther. So what I'm kind of running into is a lot of the episodes still on my list yet to do are bigger episodes that will take a lot of work. And that's the consequence of procrastination in that way.
Yeah, I see that with YouTube. And sometimes that list, something becomes stale and you just toss it out. Or it was a good idea when you started and you progressed through your content and maybe you took care of it some other way or addressed a little bit of it and don't need the rest. So definitely keep a list, right? Like I think I think podcasters are probably pretty good at jotting down on paper or something, a notes app that like you have an idea. Because ideally you're doing a show about something that you really love. So you're going to be involved in those conversations on a daily basis, right? You're going to be on Twitter, or you're going to read a blog, or you're going to listen to other podcasts somewhere in your niche. And that's one of the beautiful things of being in a niche where other people are creating content. Ryan, are other people creating content in your niche? I mean, how are you jotting down ideas? We talked a little bit, but what are some other strategies for getting episode after episode produced?
At this point, because most of mine are interview based, and because I have an audience and I have a very, very active Facebook group with 3,000 plus people in it, the content is always there because people are asking questions. They're posting inspirational stories. Like somebody recently posted or shared something in the Facebook group about a former Army captain who was injured by a roadside bomb in Iraq or Afghanistan, and now is a double amputee and just started medical school at Harvard. So I'm like, cool. That's a great pre-med story. Somebody who got into medical school has an interesting journey to tell. So I emailed him. I found his email address and I emailed him. I said, hey, somebody in my community posted your story. I'd love to have you on the podcast. He's like, okay. So it's just constantly keeping my eyes open and ears open, whatever that.
Yeah, I mean, but you're doing interview shows, which people think, oh, okay, interview shows, no problem. He doesn't have any problem, right? You just ask the next people. But how do you prioritize, or how do you think of choosing interviewees to feed the audience? Not just like the purpose of having an interview or doing an episode, right? You still have to think, how am I presenting, or what about this interview, right? How do you choose?
It's the story. Yeah. So his story, obviously inspirational. A lot of my audience are non-traditional students. They're changing careers or had problems. And so I'm just constantly on the lookout for somebody who might have a story to tell. And I'll email them. I'll message them on whatever social media platform I find them on. I'm like, hey, I saw you posted this. What's your story? And if it's a good one, hey, do you want to come on the podcast?
Nice. And that's the key, is that you know your audience enough to know they'll enjoy that story, right? So you keep an eye open for stories, you know what your audience would enjoy, and then you blend those together, which is really cool. I mean, it's something to do with the roundtable in terms of, it's always a topic, and then I kind of I'll put out probes like, well, people, if you sign up on the list, you list stuff. So I go through that and see what matches, but I may ask a question on Twitter and that sort of see who responds and what they have to participate. This year I kind of asked, how did you guys celebrate 100? So I was like, hey, come share that story. We want to talk about it. Are you in the case of you guys, you have well over hundreds of episodes. So speaking of that, Dave, 600 episodes. Is that the School of Podcasting?
It's a School of Podcasting.
Okay, buddy, I'm on 101 and I'm kind of like, I don't know what else is left without me doing an insane amount of work. And Dave, how the heck are you coming up with new stuff? Your stuff is great. And every time I listen, I'm like, Dave has great stories and he comes up, but I know there's got to be a lot of work that goes into that. How are you coming up? How are you getting to 600 in one so specific topic?
The fun part is I don't know when I did this. We talked about this earlier. Like sometimes things just evolve. And so I started doing segments. Like Ryan's going to be on the show this Monday with a Because of My Podcast story. I just was like, I got tired of saying, really, you should start a podcast. I've said that 800 times. So how can I say that in a different way? I know I'll have somebody else say, hey, this happened to me because I had a podcast. So I can go, see, I told you should have started a podcast. That's the motivation behind that. But they're great stories. I still have one. What were the last 5 podcasts you listened to? Then I'll do an interview of somebody who, for whatever reason, is having some sort of success. And then when in doubt, there's always gear. You can always talk about gear with podcasting and people will get young and giggly when you talk about that. So usually between all those things, and then just what I hear from, again, I have a Facebook group. So if you're interacting again, even with a small audience, if you're interacting with them, ask them, if they go, hey, that was a great episode. What did you like about that? Find out why did you like about that, and then do more of that. And that's the other thing. When I hear about people running out of gas, I think we should all make a mental note that the next time we listen to a podcast that we like, send an email to whoever that podcaster is, because half the time all they need is just one email from somebody going, hey, I really liked episode number 97. That was cool. Blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
That'll put so much gas in somebody's tank, because so many times they're just like, is this thing on? Hello? Yeah. Hello. So,
Dave also reads the obituaries and does amazing jobs at tying podcasting into death. I don't know how he does that.
Well, and I'm like the analogy king. So if something comes along and I'm like, that applies to podcasting. So I do that. And that again is, how do you say the same thing, but in a different way?
Yeah.
That's always the fun part. How do I repeat myself without repeating myself? Oh, well, I'll say, know your audience by Muhammad Ali died. And then, okay, Robin Williams died. Well, he was different. So, it's the same stuff, but it's a fun way. And when in doubt, do bad impressions. So that always helps as well.
Dave's super secret way is to actually co-host a roundtable and then just poach roundtablers.
That's it.
That was, I didn't know about that person in a podcast. I'm just going to take them off of the roundtable.
That's true.
Which is amazing cross promotion for the roundtable, I got to say. So stellar job, Dave.
Yes, I've had guests, many guests from the roundtable that I'm like, Jordan Harbinger. I had no idea who the guy was. He came on, he's like,
I didn't either. When I invited him on, I had no idea. And now he's like, so much to learn from that guy. So successful. I know, it's so cool. And, I totally second what you're saying about feedback. I'm not even good enough about it myself, because this works on my YouTube channel. People thank me for making a video all the time. And it has to do with the platform. It makes it super easy to comment. But I'm like, why? I've never thanked someone for making a YouTube video. And so many people do it. And guess what? It makes me make the next video, right? And so that's an amazing thing you can do. And again, we joke about being rich from podcasting and making money. That's pay, man. That is pay that you can give to a podcaster for sure. That motivation, that helps push people to that 100 episode. But we are going to wrap up here. We're at our hour mark. We talked about time. Because it's live, it's about the only show that I would focus on time limits, but we're at a good place. So as we go out here, let us know where we can find your podcast. If you have any more tips, one tip, someone listening and they've made it this far, about reaching 100 episodes, just pushing on, any tip like that, feel free to give it out. You don't have to. Let us know, most importantly, where your podcast is. Daniel J. Lewis, as always, for 100 episodes, whatever. Thanks for joining. Thanks for co-hosting.
Spend some time. Well, you're welcome. Thank you for doing this podcast. I really appreciate Podcasters Roundtable. I don't say it enough, like at all, maybe, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate these 100 episodes we've had together. Most of them I've been here for. And I really look forward to these because Dave, Ray, you guys have become some of my closest friends. And then getting to meet other cool guys like Steven and getting to hang out with other friends like Ryan too and other podcasters. This is a highlight of the month whenever we can do this. So I would suggest if you're working toward that milestone or you're past that milestone and you're trying to figure out how to keep going, spend maybe an hour, maybe less, just brainstorm what kinds of things could you do future episodes about. Movies, guests, topics, stories, whatever your show is about. You could come up with a list of random things, and then that can be your plan for years to come and hundreds of episodes to come. And I'm Daniel J. Lewis from the audacitytopodcast.com.
Yeah, thanks. And I, thank you guys, Dave, Daniel, for coming on this ride with me. And it's because, I talk about this thing being friends getting together to just chat about podcasting. And it's even a little bit more formal than I planned it to be because I do pick a topic so that's a little focused. Otherwise, I would say let's just turn on the mic every 2 weeks and talk because that is the genesis of this and Google and being able to do this so easily. But we have a topic, it's focused. I think I was surprised by this podcast. I hear about this one more often than I've heard about other podcasts that I've done. And I think it's that fun that someone in the chat alluded to that we have. It's new people all the time. We're constantly learning. And our friendship has just become that much stronger. Like we're good friends. So I appreciate that. And thanks for joining us, Dave, for 100 episodes ish. We're good.
Yeah. Well, just to share a little bit on Ray's story, I remember that lunch at New Media Expo, and here's how much thought we put in. He's like, "Hey, there's this new thing from Google. Do you want to come on and talk about podcasting?" And I'm like, "Okay." I mean, that was about as much of the idea as you had at that point. And I was like, "Okay." And we just figured it out later. So if you're a person who's, don't overthink it sometimes. Just start and you'll figure it out later. We talked about that at the beginning of the show, that sometimes, you just you'll figure it out at episode 7 and a little more episode 20 and just, you can't get any better if you don't start, and you're not going to, inspire anybody or make somebody laugh or whatever if the file is on your hard drive. That does nobody any good. So you eventually got to put it out. So find me over at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Yeah, and I mean, if you were listening closely, I told a story where I listened to one earbud and got in trouble at work listening to Dave. I didn't have a podcast about podcasts at that time. I didn't know Dave. I called into his show, that 5 and 5 thing. I was so stoked to be on Dave's show and to hear it while I'm in the store. I'm like, I made it. I made him on Dave's show. And, 100 episodes later and years down the road, we co-host this thing and we're good buds. So get out there in your community, make friends. We always talk about this pull between competition and your niche and all that stuff. This show has been fantastic for all of our shows, right? And like I said, people will come and go between shows, but you get in front of more of the people that you want and you have a lot of fun and make good friends. So tonight is kind of special. Before I turn this into a beer commercial, Ryan, dude, thanks so much for your first roundtable and in celebrating 100 with us.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on 100. I'll hope I'll be invited back for 200. That's go. I'm calling it right now. I got dibs. I'm Dr. Ryan Gray, and if you have anybody in your life that wants to go to medical school, send them over to mededmedia.com.
Very cool. Yeah, it's funny because I don't want to get too far off track here, but do you see a lot of people, you think medical school and you think, oh my gosh, if I don't start that right out of college, it's not going to happen. I bet a lot of people transition. That's kind of what your show maybe is. I mean, focuses on a lot. You got that guy from Iraq who then started Harvard Medical School after he basically had a career, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Non-traditional students are becoming more and more popular and more common. So that's good. Yeah. And so my one piece of advice I forgot, be patient. Your audience will come as long as you're putting out good content, and forgive yourself. If you miss a week, it's okay. Just show up the next week.
Nice. I like it. That's how you get to 100. You show up, at least you miss, you just keep showing up, right? I like that. Perfect. Steven, thanks for joining us for your first roundtable. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks again for inviting me, and congratulations again. Some of the things that, and again, it's been kind of brought up throughout this episode, but while it may be easy to sometimes get burnt out, you can always feel free to take time off and let your listeners know, because they're always, you'll have your dedicated ones, you'll have your ones that'll come and go, but overall, in order to provide them the best value and to kind of improve your craft, it kind of sometimes helps to take a step back and do the whole brainstorming thing, because that's kind of what I did when I hit the episode 200 mark. I kind of wanted to switch gears and go in a different direction and kind of segment my show a little bit so that I don't necessarily have to record it all in one sitting, and then I can record it all as one episode at the end of the week, which I have found has helped me out in that. But yeah, I'm Steven Phillips from Altered Geek on geekcastradio.com.
Awesome. All pros. And we got tips right up to the end. So I hope that anyone listening or watching this far felt like they got value out of this way we chose to celebrate 100. And dude, seriously, the chat, you guys, thank you so much for everyone who shows up every couple of weeks. If you've ever shown up, if you've ever been on the Roundtable, basically anyone who's had any contact with the show is a roundtabler. It's what I like to call you. It's part of the friends and family here. So thanks most of all to everyone who's listened. We will continue to be here. We're on our way to 101, and we'll consider bringing Ryan back for 200. He's gonna have to wait a while. He should have lobbied for 105, but whatever. All right, you guys, podcastersroundtable.com/guest, so you can be on. You can push Ryan out of 200 if you try hard enough. See you next time. We're gonna wave, and we're out. Adios. Oh, I love it, Dave. Nice touch. Throw it up in the air.